Welcome to I'm Not Joking, the podcast where a behavioral scientist examines what it's like to live a humorous life. Glimpse into the lives of the funniest people in entertainment, business, and science as your host, Dr. Peter McGraw, explores their habits, motivations, and secrets to success. Get ready to fire up your brain and your funny bone. Now, here's your host.
Welcome to I'm Not Joking, the podcast that looks at the lives of funny people. I'm Peter McGraw. Today's guest is Merrill Markoe. Merrill is a comedian, comedy writer, author of 10 books, and Emmy Award-winning writer and producer of The Late Show with David Letterman, as well as a host of other credits. Welcome, Merrill.
Thank you very much.
So, Merrill, if you weren't working as a comedian, producer, author, what would you be doing?
You mean what would have been my other career if I just went in a whole other direction? My dream career would have been to be Jane Goodall.
Okay.
That would have been fantastic. And then I guess if that didn't work out for some reason, it's not like there's a whole lot of call for. Well, actually, there's a lot of avenues you can become some version of Jane Goodall.
Yeah, you could be the Jane Goodall for sloths or the Jane Goodall for...
Yeah, I think animal research would have really suited me. I do volunteer work once a week at a wildlife recovery place.
Okay.
And I really love that. And or the other part would have been psychology. I probably would have been a pretty good shrink.
Okay. Why do you say that?
Just because that's a really big part of writing. And for me, it was a really big part of maintaining equilibrium, was to learn about that stuff and be able to motivate people based on what you know that their content is. I
see. So your interest in psychology... So I'm
protective.
Yes. Well,
I learned all about narcissists so I could have something to, I was an early adapter of the narcissism.
Is that right?
Thing. Oh yeah. It's very, very popular now. We even have a president like that, but I was all about the narcissists in the 80s.
I see. And that gave you a leg up in Hollywood, given the number of narcissists.
Exactly. Yeah. It teaches you what stuff to give up on.
So that's interesting because I was drawn to psychology as a high school student. I had a psychology class as a senior in high school, which is really rare. I'm sort of surprised my school had it.
Yeah, we didn't have it.
Yeah, I think most don't. But I was drawn to it because it helped me, figure out myself a bit.
Well, most shrinks, I think that's why they become a shrink, don't you suppose, as they have disturbing tendencies? Well,
certainly, I certainly think that the appeal is that it's helpful and it's illuminating. It kind of helps you figure out the puzzles you have about yourself. But I think it's interesting that some of being drawn to it was it helped you figure out the puzzles of other people.
Both. Yeah, both. Well, first you end up writing about yourself mainly when you are a writer because you can only project just what you can project. And then you can take in what you can take in, but it's coming through you. Mm-hmm. So you need to know if you don't have any sense of yourself, you really can't be much of an observer of anything, I don't think.
Yeah. Certainly, I think having this dual identity of comfort and discomfort.
What does that mean?
In the sense of, it's really nice to be grounded in knowing who you are and having a perspective, and then yet not being so comfortable in the world that you don't notice the things that are sort of peculiar and strange and off.
Well, you certainly can't be in comedy and not notice
That's what I mean.
Things.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's pretty much what the whole field is.
Yes, I think I always like to say that comedians, especially stand-up comedians, are pointing out what's wrong with themselves or with the world. And they often point out what's wrong with themselves first to give them license to then point out what's wrong with the world.
Right.
In every other way.
Right. Well, yeah, and also because what they're pointing out in terms of what's wrong with the world is totally based on what's wrong with them. It's not going to be, it all goes filtering through that one web, whatever it is.
Yeah, I think so. So it's the 80s. You're surrounded by narcissists.
Yeah.
So what's the pro tip? How do you deal with a narcissist?
Well, I read about 50 books on it.
Okay.
First of all, everybody has written. There are so many books, and most of them say the same thing over and over again, and a number of them are really, really good.
Okay.
And basically, what they teach you is disengage. If you engage, you're screwed. You can't win.
So you have to keep some distance.
I mean, watch our president. You can't engage with him. He is going to win every time. He's really good at
it helps
talking
to be
in
president
a circle.
too.
And,
yeah.
It wouldn't matter if he was president. He'd be making the same noise. It's horrible that he's president, in my opinion. But it wouldn't matter if he wasn't. He'd be doing the same thing, and probably will be if they ever get him out of there. I'm sure he's going to have a TV show, and he's just going to be doing exactly the same thing and heating up exactly the same crowd because he's really good at a circular pattern of thinking about himself and the world. And you try to engage with one of those people, and there's no point, no entry point, no exit point. It's...
Yeah. So when let's say you're working on a show, you're doing, you're working in the business, and you can't escape that kind of personality.
Yeah, you run into it all the time, and what you learn is you can't. Ultimately, you can't win with it. You can try to be on your own with it, but you have to get away from it.
I see.
I grew up I had narcissistic parents, so that was why I got really interested in it, and then I was drawn to narcissists all over the place because of my shrink explained to me something called repetition compulsion.
Okay.
So. Ultimately, the only way I ever got along with my parents is to just stop arguing with them. Just let it be.
You're not going to win.
You're not going to win.
Yeah.
No, you don't necessarily have to agree, but you have to say, well, move on to another topic or leave the room or something. Well, I'll see you later.
So what is to be honest, this is outside my psychological training.
Really, it is not.
It is. Yeah.
What is your psychological training?
So I, sort of social psychology, cognitive psychology, economics. And so, I never took a counseling or clinical psychology course. The closest I ever came was I dated a clinical psychology grad student when I was a grad student.
That's the equivalent of how many units? That's like 25 units, I think.
That's like a 3-credit class. So for the person listening who might not know much about narcissists, what are the symptoms? Like when how is it that you know that you have a narcissist in your life?
Well, you find yourself in fights that don't make any sense.
Okay.
That's a really big one. They're because they have a personality as I understand it. And I'm, obviously I don't have...
Sure.
But
you've read more about it than me.
I've read a lot of books, but there are those kind of books that you can imagine they would be, there are things that I could get easily and I could understand.
Okay.
But as I understand it, the personality flips back and forth between grandiosity and humiliation. It doesn't take much to trigger it, and it doesn't necessarily mean anything that you did anything to trigger it. It could be the smallest little thing that you did that triggered it. So you're dealing with someone who thinks they're really hot shit and they're really excited about themselves, and then all of a sudden you look at them wrong. They think, well, what is that? That person thinks I'm shit, and suddenly they attack you because they think you think they're shit. It's a whole inescapable, unworkable syndrome that you just have to get away from.
Yeah, and so versus someone who has some healthy level of confidence and assertiveness, where they understand what they're good at, they understand what they're not good at, and they're not personally threatened.
Or anybody who knows how to roll with the punches. I mean, no narcissist rolls with any punches.
I see.
Everybody, it's all you suddenly are in a massive fight, and you didn't even know there was anything going on. You were eating lunch with them, and you're talking about potato salad, and suddenly you're in a fight.
I see.
It's like that. So that's the big. The other one is, of course, that they never ask you any questions about yourself.
Ah, yes. Okay, that makes good sense. And then the other one is they're likely a man.
I don't know what the breakdown is of that. It might be. Everybody knows a few narcissistic women too.
That's fair. I'm teasing a bit when I say that, but I think you know what it is. You're probably right. It may not be as skewed towards men as we think it is, but we certainly identify it more when it's because it does seem to correlate.
I don't know. I don't know anything about that. Yeah. My mother was a narcissist in my family, so she was.
That's fair.
She was real good at it.
Her commitment.
Yeah.
So on one hand, you might have become a psychologist or a psychiatrist. On the other hand, the Jane Goodall of some of the animal kingdom, of some animal from the animal kingdom?
Yeah, I would have liked to live my life on an elephant preserve and be raising baby elephants and studying them or something like that. Yeah, or some animal. I don't know who it would have been. Whoever hasn't been studied enough. Possibly the animals nobody likes, hyenas.
Right.
I don't know. I like them all.
Yeah.
I like all animals.
You are, and I know you're an animal person. You have dogs.
I have dogs. I don't. That's all I have. I only have 2 dogs because they don't get along well with others.
Okay.
So,
and then, but you also, dogs are a big part of your life. So you've written about dogs. Dogs have found its way into.
I used to write about dogs a lot until it just became so written about.
Dogs are very popular right now.
That I can't. It doesn't feel like an area that needs any additional info from me. So I stopped writing about them.
Okay. So so I teach a marketing management course. As a marketing professor, this makes me very happy to hear you say this, because you're responding to the competitive forces in the marketplace.
I feel like as a humor writer, I don't really want to weigh in on stuff that everybody's already got a million great jokes about.
I see.
In fact, that's lately I just, when I first got on Twitter, it was so much fun. Mm-hmm. It wasn't that I was I wasn't there immediately, but I don't know how long Twitter had been out when I finally started doing it, but it used to be a really great situation where I followed all these comedians I know, and I would wake up every day and I'd write jokes.
Yeah, it's fun. It was a fun place.
It was really fun, and it was fun to see what everybody was writing, and it was a challenge, and it was fun to have a reason to be sitting and writing just weird jokes again. And then, as soon as Trump got elected, it all changed, and it's not like that at all. Now when I think of jokes, and I'm not writing for anybody. Mm-hmm. I don't even try to put them out on Twitter. I figure if I thought of it, everybody already thought of it, and it's already out there. Yeah, and I don't want to be repeating everybody, and so I just don't bother.
Yeah, I mean, I've had this conversation on the podcast a number of times. I thought it was Twitter was a fun place. It's obviously it's gotten a lot darker, and then I do think it is interesting. It's a case study in parallel invention. So, what a lot of people might say is joke stealing really is just people
and there is
coming
joke
up with
stealing
the
too.
basic ideas.
Yeah, well, a lot of obviously the most obvious joke premise is when Trump says something really, really stupid, everybody who knows how to write jokes thinks of that joke.
Yes.
Or thinks of some version of a joke. So even if they didn't think of my exact joke, 30 other people thought of a really good joke. And so I don't want to weigh in with joke number 31 on the same subject. I mean, it just seems like futile. It didn't used to be that. You know what? When I started writing for TV, when I was actually back in the Letterman show days, you had to qualify somehow to get to a position to have an outlet where material would reach an audience, including in magazines or anything, or you couldn't just spew. Now there's so many ways for people to reach audiences that there's just oversaturation for most stuff, I feel like.
Yeah, I have it's interesting. I have mixed feelings about this exact idea. So on one hand, I like the idea of gatekeepers, tastemakers. And so, they keep quality up. And that obviously is not just within the world of
I don't know
comedy.
if there are gatekeepers anymore.
No, that's what I mean. But I think for a time, like if you wanted a book, you needed a publisher, an editor to buy your book, or at least to, be willing to print it. Now, if you can't find a publisher who will buy your book, you can make your own book.
I guess you always could.
Yeah, but not with the ease. And the same thing, and I think the world of comedy is like this also. There was a time where, you needed a network, or you needed cable, or you needed something. Now you have YouTube, and Twitter,
YouTube.
and Instagram, and
I would have been all over YouTube if I were 20. It's like a really fun place to be 20, I would guess.
Yeah, and so for me, on one hand, I think you have to deal with a lot of crud. You have to deal with a lot of bad comedy in the same way that you have to deal with a lot of bad books. But the thing that I like about it is at least it levels the playing field. And so the people who might not have made it past the gatekeepers because they're too different. They're too strange. They're not, they don't look, sound, whatever, like the gatekeepers. Now have a voice and have the chance to attract an audience. And so I think now we have a much more segmented marketplace where people have their go-to folks. And so on the other hand,
I don't even know anything about that stuff. I mean, and then there's that whole world of, what do they call them? Influencers.
Yes.
Yeah. One day, for some reason, because I thought I might write something about it, I spent time looking at the thousands of girls who buy stuff in a shopping bag, come to their bedroom, take it out, and show you all the things they bought. And there's hundreds of these girls, hundreds and hundreds of, and I was just stunned by it. There you go. There's that. Who knew that was a thing?
I know. I think there are sort of parallels between that and comedy.
You almost can't make fun of that because it's so instantly. Well, I guess you could. I mean, if you have a spot on Saturday Night Live and you can fashion a really good segment out of it, you probably could make that a repeating character. With
the right character.
Yeah, you got the right actress to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, this is an interesting question. So imagine you were 20 again, and you're still targeting comedy. You're not thinking about psychology. You're not thinking about animals. I feel like there's so much competition. There's so many people. Comedy is suddenly like an appealing. People believe it's a true. It
has been for a long time.
Yeah, but my point is that I think that it's even more democratized than ever because now you can be in Wichita, Kansas, creating comedy.
Well, that's probably to the good.
What's that?
That might be to the good.
And I think it is in the sense that it's a big funnel, and so the best of the best are, if the best of the best come from not hundreds of people, but thousands or 10,000s of people, well, then the chance of finding another Dave Chappelle or someone like that goes up. I guess my question for you is, would that have deterred you? Like if you're, because you just said, I stopped writing about dogs because...
Yeah, there's just too much. It is really saturated.
So
I don't even enjoy reading about them anymore. I still enjoy being around them, though.
Sure, yeah, they're love machines. Yeah, and so I guess my question is: would you, let's transport you as a 20-year-old, as a 25-year-old into today's world with a comedic mind? Do you still become a comedian and comedy writer?
Oh, I sort of, I sort of didn't ever really. I didn't know for a long time. I started out, I have an art degree. Mm-hmm. I got a master's degree in art.
I see.
And because I didn't know comedy was a field. I didn't think it was a thing. I mean, I always knew that I couldn't stop making jokes about everything, but I didn't know that there was anything you could do with it. I watched comedians on TV, and I used to take drama classes, and I knew, somehow it didn't add up that it was a career that you would pursue until at some point.
But it was barely a career that you would pursue back then.
Yeah, it didn't seem like that to me. So I went into art, and then at some point I had a job teaching down here at USC. I was teaching studio art. Okay. I was teaching painting and drawing.
All right.
And I realized there was a cinema department at USC, and then I realized, that's a department. I mean, it never even occurred to me that was a department either. I went to UC Berkeley, and we didn't have that for a department, I don't think, at that time.
There's now a comedy minor at USC.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, so you can take a class in comedy directing and comedy writing and so on.
That's weird.
Yeah.
I mean, well, that's good, I guess. I mean, it is a field. You can break anything down into analysis of it and ways that, I don't know, you can teach it to some people and many you can. I taught one class in Canada. So there's a junior college up there, Humber.
Okay.
And it has had a comedy department that had some people in it that I know. And I taught a class for 2 days, and I spent a lot of time thinking, well, what is it you want to tell people if you're going to teach them comedy? What do you mean to be telling them even? And I thought, okay, I don't know exactly. There's a million ways to go with this, but one way I was thinking is teach people how to make fun of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And then it turned out, because these kids were like 19 years old, pointed out to me by another faculty member, they don't know who they are at all anymore. You can't make fun of yourself till you know who you are.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's too threatening.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So you have to target rage. You have to, yell about...
Punch up.
Yeah, or scream about fast food or whatever,
I see.
The
annoying things in life.
Yeah, you can't make fun of yourself. You'll annihilate yourself. You didn't have a chance to form yet.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
So I had the wrong approach.
Did you like teaching?
I'm not that knocked out by it. It's all right.
It's okay.
I've had a couple of different teaching experiences. Yeah, it's all right. Some people seem to take to it more than I do. I feel like I overwork it.
I see.
I don't know. It's all right.
Are you, we were talking before we opened that you, it seems like you like a kind of quiet life.
Yeah, I do. I just did a graphic novel, and I spent the last 2 years doing 400 drawings.
Is that right? Wow.
That's what I've been doing. I've been sitting alone.
Uh-huh.
Well, my husband is around here, so I'm not entirely alone, and occasionally I go out to dinner. But other than that, I've been sitting just drawing and drawing and drawing and drawing and drawing, and I, for the most part, really enjoyed it. Yeah,
so I teach. So as I mentioned earlier, I teach a marketing management course, and I do a full song and dance in that class. I try to make the class highly engaging, very interactive, and then where I can, kind of applicable to people's real lives, not just their professional lives.
No.
And I teach this, and this has come up in the podcast.
You must be
before.
beloved.
I'd say well liked.
That's good enough.
Well, the students appreciate the hard work.
Yeah.
They recognize that I'm trying. And there's obviously,
and they all
I'm
leave
imperfect.
the classroom going, "Oh, see, he's trying so hard."
He tried so hard, and I'm like, I try to inject a little bit of comedy. That goes a long way.
And then
in
they
the
leave
classroom.
the classroom going, "See, he injected a little bit of comedy."
He tried, and so, but I'm not for everyone, and so there's always the challenge in the classes of to get this sort of large majority of students to really, really like it. There's going to be a small number of students who don't.
Yeah, marketing is the kind of thing you either take to or you don't.
Yeah,
I wouldn't guess
so.
Everybody would hit everybody equally.
Yeah, not all the students want to be in the class. That's a big challenge.
Well, that was the same even when I was teaching art. About at least half of the students were there because they thought it was an easy
Oh, yes,
A.
that's a mistake. That is a huge mistake. So on day one, I present a model of well-being, of living a good life. And in it, I highlight...
That sounds good.
It's great. I wish I could teach a whole course around that idea.
You can.
I guess I could, yeah.
That's why I'm here today. to tell you that you can go out and teach that class.
Well, what I like about it is... So, you're a great case study.
I am.
For this idea. So, one of the paths to living a good life, the model is called the PERMA model. It's an acronym. Pleasure, engagement, relationships, meaning, achievement. PERMA. Mm-hmm. And so
Did you make that up?
No, this is a psychologist named Martin Seligman who wrote about it in a book called Flourish. And he's been studying well-being for many, many years, and he recently revised his model of well-being, which he thought was too limiting. For example, adding this E, engagement. You are a case study in living a good life through engagement. Mm-hmm. And so what is engagement? Well, engagement is the pursuit of what's called flow. Mm-hmm. And a flow state is this thing where you're in this sweet spot where you are optimally challenged. That is, your abilities are commensurate with the challenge that you are facing.
Yeah.
And those challenges are typically creative endeavors, problem solving. They don't have to be, but generally that's the case. In other words, artistic pursuits, writing, painting, sculpting, making music, whatever that might be. But it could be something more entrepreneurial, mm-hmm. Building a business or something like that. And so, other people live a good life through their relationships, being part of a tight-knit community. Other people through achievement, building
Everybody needs
skyscrapers.
some of all of that, don't they?
Well, I think that the way the model handles this is, you can imagine each of these paths to living a good life as having a weight, and some get more weight than others, and the weight depends a little bit on where you are developmentally in life. So, for example, being a gymnast, right? So you're a 13-year-old girl, and you have Olympic dreams, and you spend almost all of your waking time either in a gym or studying, and then now you're 21 years old and your career is over. So then all of a sudden this sort of heavy, almost 90% of your living a good life is focused on achievement.
Yeah, but then you've got all that ability that you came through the gymnastics with, that you can apply to a million other things. It's a great thing to have more things going on in life than just one, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think, I
always think people make a big mistake just narrow casting into one little corner.
Yeah, I don't have an opinion. I actually don't have an opinion about that. Like, I think, to me, what I like about the model is that there are multiple paths to living a good life, and that if you switch people around, right? So, for example, I do a fair bit of creative work also. I'm working on a book, and this I think counts as creative work,
right? And
so on. But if you and me, I'm not good with this.
Both are
switched worlds, we would both be less happy.
Right.
Right. Because you wouldn't be doing enough creative work and I would be too isolated. And so what I like about the model is that what it does is it sort of provides you a playground by which to think about what a good life would be for you, but it doesn't provide a prescription. Mm-hmm. In a world where everybody wants to tell you how you should live, I don't want to tell anybody how they should live, but I want to say how you're living is likely okay. Which, I think that the world of pop science tries to overly simplify things. People write books and this is the path to happiness. Right. And what it should say is, this is the path to happiness for 20% of people.
Well, there's also this little paradigm that occurred to me a number of years ago, which is any day that nothing really horrible is happening is happy.
It's a good day.
Yeah.
Yeah, the absence of bad is pretty good.
Really good.
I agree.
Once you're in one of those ruts where everything bad thing is happening, you are so excited when that stuff stops.
I know,
if that stuff stops.
Just like the other day, I'm a pretty happy guy. Like, I have a good life, and in part because of just the way I'm wired, and in part because I've kind of done a lot of hard work personally, professionally, to put myself in a place to be able to enjoy life. But of course, every so often, things you just don't feel right. Things don't go your way. And I'm just like, man, I am having a terrible day. And I always just have to remind myself, I'm sure tomorrow will be better. And it is an interesting reminder when you have those days, that the days where you don't have, whether it be... Well,
you also need if you're in a creative field, you need a certain amount of actual engagement with the people you're... I don't think anybody goes in. Maybe they do. I don't want to make generalizations, but I was going to say most people I know who went into a creative field went into it for response. They didn't go into it to just be screaming into a void.
Yeah.
And you have to, if you're not getting any feedback that way, that tends to make a lot of people nuts.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think, what's fascinating is the kind of flow state is built on the process. Is built on the creation. So the time in front of the typewriter or sculpting the clay. Well, in the
case of comedians, this was never the case for me, which is why I was never a particularly successful comedian. Is a lot of comedians I know, the whole process is being on stage.
Getting on stage. Yeah.
And they write on stage. I mean, that to me is amazing. Every time I've ever been on stage, I spend a lot of time writing, and then I bring the material to stage. Mm-hmm. I know people who get on stage, and that's when they do their writing. Their brain works that they need that kind of constant feedback to put the key in the engine that makes them right.
Yeah, I think I have mixed feelings. I mean, like when Dave Chappelle does it,
he's not the only one.
No,
I
of course
know a
not.
ton of people who do that.
Yeah, he's like the poster child for doing that. I think in some ways, like there's a story that I heard. I think it was Jason Zinnemann told me about it. Jason.
Yeah.
I actually watched an interview that Jason did with you with part of his book launch.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And so I think maybe Jason told me about this, about like the audience is leaving the theater and then Chappelle's calling them back in because he has an idea and he wants to work on this stuff a little bit.
That's
more.
amazing.
That's amazing. So I want to go back to the dog thing one last time because I think there's some fun story about this. So you brought dogs into late night.
Yeah, weirdly I did.
Yeah.
And I don't think that sounds real to me anymore. But it was because I had a camera crew that was asking me, what are we doing on Friday?
Uh-huh.
And after I was making up things that we were doing once a week with this camera crew, I started filming little dog spots.
Yeah, because you did a dog poetry bit.
Well, that was my dog. Yeah, I did that, and I used to do these segments. This was way in the beginning of that show, though. That was whenever that show started, 81.
Okay.
So I was doing these things called Films by Bob the Dog, which was one of my dogs, and they were dog point of view. They were the camera as a dog.
Yes, I've seen one of these. Yeah,
there were maybe 6 of them,
and it's like like legs under a table.
Yeah, it
and
was
stuff
that
like
kind
that.
of. Yeah, it was that, and then I actually put the actual dog in it for dog poetry.
So your cameraman, who's
Carl, cameraman Carl. We'd have long discussions where I would discuss because cameras were huge in those days.
Yes,
it would be so easy to do that POV kind of stuff now with your phone.
Right.
My God! But on the other hand, it was a Sony.
But it must have made
Trinitron, I think it was. No, that's a television. It was a mini cam.
Okay.
And it was about the size of a shoebox, or a really big, if you have big feet, a big shoebox with a handle on the top. So I always thought of that as the base of the dog, like the torso, and then the handle would be the way that you would if you were leading your dog around by the collar.
Got it.
So he was holding it, so we would hold it. I just had a dog in mind and then the lens was the face.
I see, yes.
So that was the way we were doing those. And there was a lot of discussion about, no, he's moving too fast. No, he would go in a circle there were some limitations to that, but
yeah, that was fun. And then also you brought stupid pet tricks to the screen.
Yeah, we did that. We started
which
doing
are very
that
dog focused.
They were dog focused because that's what people are able to train at home.
Yeah, sure. And most people have dogs.
But we started doing those on Dave's morning show.
Yes, that's right. And Dave likes dogs too. That is like super clear from watching those old clips.
Yeah.
He just lights up. And then that turned into stupid human tricks.
Well, no, because the way we were doing that show back then is it was basically it was a 5-day-a-week show, and it was 90 minutes. No, it was 60 minutes a day. You had to fill it up. Mm-hmm. So just because if you had stupid pet tricks on Monday, you couldn't have stupid pet tricks on Tuesday.
Yes.
You had to have a lot of different plates spinning at the same time. So whenever you'd have an idea that worked out, I would sit with the other writers and we would go, okay, what else can we do along these lines?
See.
So stupid human tricks was logical.
Sure.
And then we also thought of stupid baby tricks, but then we were afraid of child abuse, which
Okay.
would have definitely happened.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. And so what's that process like? So you got to feed this beast, right? You've got 60 minutes a day, 5 days a week.
Right. That's the task.
And so you're an exceptionally creative person.
I am. I guess I am.
Yes,
well,
of
I'm
course
at least
you are.
an average amount of creative.
No. You're highly creative. That's
I am
obvious to me.
I'm pretty obsessed with work too. I'm like a major workaholic. I mean, when I was doing these drawings for this
you just
goddamn
did
book,
400 drawings.
I know, and I was doing them day and night too. I mean, when you do art, for me, it's a different kind of time. It's utterly different than a writing time. Writing, you were really like riding a horse when you're writing, and you're just on top of a thing and you're flying a plane kind of, where you have to keep controlling everything and you have to keep thinking of things. When you draw, it's way more like driving, it's the other side of the brain, I think. I've heard discounted theories about right brain, left brain, but I would say that if in fact my understanding of right brain and left brain is accurate, it's right brain on drawing, because when I started doing drawings for this thing, you start in the morning and like you go, okay, I'm just going to do this for a few more minutes, and then it's 11 o'clock at night.
Wow.
It really just is it's got its own time span. It's really almost like time travel. It's a weird other world when you enter that, because once you know how to draw, if you're not teaching yourself how to draw, and for me, drawing is almost like handwriting.
Okay.
But it doesn't take place the same way as writing. Writing is like, oh no, oh, okay, what else? What else? Drawing, you have to just keep moving forward.
Yeah.
You just keep working on it and finishing it and fixing it, and it's visual and it's got tools. It's real interesting. It's a whole other kind of time.
Yeah, that idea, that's one of those characteristics of flow where time seems to fade away.
It doesn't fade away when you write. I mean, when you write, for me, you can certainly get wrapped up in it and keep going with it and everything, but you have to be present all the time.
I see.
In fact, I don't know how anybody writes and is drunk. I mean, I know there's a great storied history of drunk writers and writers on opium and whatever, but you put anything in me, including like a couple of swallows of wine, and my vocabulary goes away.
Yeah, I think that's...
So I don't know how they do it. I mean, it's people who are better adapted to abuse, I guess.
Perhaps, yeah. My writing, if I'm altered in any way, is I've had a little bit of caffeine. That's pretty much.
Caffeine goes hand in hand with it.
That's of course. Yeah.
That's helpful.
You get a little mood boost and a little more attention there. I'm curious about. So you were saying about like when you were. So you went to art school.
Yeah.
And you were like, you didn't know that there was a career in comedy.
No,
in the
and
way
then
that people do now.
And I came down here I moved down here for a job. Okay. I was teaching
Los Angeles.
at USC, and then I started hanging around their film department because it was the first time I'd seen a film department, and I was just completely stunned, like how much I thought, well, why aren't I doing this? This is the greatest thing. Of course I should be doing this. I know he's meant to be doing this. And so I audited a lot of classes. That was the first time I found out there was a field. I thought it was all people handing the job off to their kid.
I see.
I'd been watching TV, but it never occurred to me that it was a thing that you could
go study. Yeah.
I never did go study. Well, I did study it when I was hanging around the film department, but I mean, it didn't occur to me that there was a process where you could submit work, or that you could intersect this group of people, or it just never, I thought they were on some other planet. And then I decided I wanted to see if I could get work somewhere in the film business, and I was taking sound classes, and I was taking filmmaking and all this different stuff, script writing. And then it dawned on me that obviously I moved back up to San Francisco, which is where I was from. The thing I could do without having to purchase massive amounts of equipment was just write.
Yes.
I was already...
Low overhead. Writing is low overhead.
Right. And also I sort of was trained to be a writer. I mean, my mother kind of wanted to be a writer and didn't really do it. She had some jobs during World War II as a kind of a copy editor or something. So I was sort of trained to be a writer, and I didn't really want to be a writer. But then I thought, well, I think I can do this, and I wrote spec material, and I moved down to LA by myself and got a job like within a couple of weeks.
And
it was really weird. I look back on it now and just think, what the hell was that?
Wow.
That was so weird. Instantly, I got a job and I was telling all these friends of mine, no, you just moved down there. They'll hire anybody.
Well, look, you're writing.
Because I have such a good ego.
Yeah, your writing must have been good even at that early stage.
I got to assume it was kind of okay.
Yes,
I mean, I was getting work. So.
Given how terrible the average person is at writing, if you had some chops back then. Now, was your writing comedic at the time?
Yeah, it was. In fact, I had been really studying the Algonquin Round Table folks.
I'm not familiar.
Well, Dorothy Parker and Robert Benchley and
yes. Okay.
S.J. Perlman and the other names I'm blanking on right now, but those were the three I was reading in the biggest quantity.
Okay. And so, one of the things that I think is really fascinating. So you were spending time at the Comedy Store.
So I moved down to L.A. and I wound up at the Comedy Store and at the Improv also.
Okay.
I remember looking at the guys at the Comedy Store who the night that I went there. Yeah, the regulars, which right off the bat, one of them was Jay. And another one was Dave. And they were all going on every night.
Jay Leno, Dave Letterman.
Yeah, and George Miller, I remember, was one of my favorites.
And you told me earlier that George Miller who had the quote about when someone goes, ooh?
No, that's George Meyer.
George Meyer.
That's my friend George Meyer. He's one of the creative forces behind The Simpsons.
Yeah, so George Meyer says that ooh is halfway to...
He said that once to me. I don't even know if he remembers he says it, but yeah, I always thought that was the greatest.
That's fun, yeah.
Ooh is halfway to a laugh. We were writing some jokes together, and yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, so these regulars are there.
Yeah, and I couldn't believe they weren't being paid. That it was people doing this for free, that there was a coterie of these people. There was a tribe of them, and they were all getting up and just doing this stuff for free. I was stunned because they were all, I thought, good. They were pretty good.
And then you started doing this.
I started doing it too, yeah. And then I got waylaid into working on a Letterman show.
Right.
Moved to New York and just started doing that.
As they say, the rest is history.
It's somebody's history. I don't know if it was my history.
But you have an important, obviously. So, for me, so I'm 49 years old. So I kind of grew up in the sweet spot of that show. I was never interested in the other late night shows.
Yeah, I wasn't either.
Carson was.
I never was either. I always
my
thought it
grandparents
was boring.
watched Carson, kind of thing. But Letterman appealed to me.
Well, there was a lot of creative stuff going on there when I was around it. So.
Yeah, and I mean, it was silly and it was fun and it was irreverent, and I'm curious. One of my favorite bits that I remember was Dave went up to the top of a building and would just throw stuff off of it to see what would happen.
Right. Well, see, that was a follow-up to, this is the thing I was telling you about Stupid Pedrick, Stupid Human Tricks. That was a follow-up to, I believe it was George Meyer again's idea. We were running things over with a steamroller.
Oh, yes. Okay.
That was the beginning of that. And then and they were making these crazy lists of things to run over with a steamroller, the only one of which I recall was a nutritious breakfast, and it was a bowl of cereal and a plate of toast, and ran it over with a steamroller. And so after we all had enjoyed that so much, and it seemed to go over really well, and we did a bunch of different. Yeah. Well, we'd always do as many of them as we could when we would go out and film these things, because if you could film enough for 5 episodes, that would be a better.
Sure. Yeah, that's great.
You've got all those days to fill up. And then when we couldn't think of anything else to run over with a steamroller, then we started thinking, well, what else can you do to destroy stuff? And so they started dropping stuff off of buildings, and then after that, there was a sequence of those things. I forget what else, but I remember one that didn't work was overinflating things. Okay. Because there wasn't that many things you could overinflate.
Yeah, I can see that, right.
But
yeah, it's worth a shot.
That was the way the thinking went, was, what else? What else can we, we did that. What else can we do?
Well, that was a crowd pleaser for me as a teen boy. So I think I picked this up from Zinnemann's book. Like, you were really innovative in terms of shaping, the kind of beats of late night, in terms of taking Dave's strengths.
Yeah.
And avoiding his weaknesses. So
you have to avoid his weaknesses. He won't let you play to his weaknesses. He would rather kill you.
Okay, that's fair. But one of those things was like, Dave seemed to be really strong improvisationally versus as an actor.
Yeah.
And so you would do these man on the street kind of
Well, he's really comfortable doing that, so you'd have to give him fuel for it.
Yeah. And so you started doing bits, where like leaving the studio and just going down. Like there was
we started doing that early on, and on the morning show we were doing that. We were leaving the studio. It just was more interesting to have things. Yeah, of course. More things to do than just sit in the studio.
Mm-hmm. And so I guess my question is, how much of this stuff, like if you were to sort of, so some of this came from, what do they say about necessity is the mother of invention, right? So some of it's that.
Well, I've told this over and over again. In fact, I got to say that I feel like I'm boring everybody, and I'm boring myself by even talking about it, because I've told this shit so many times.
Okay.
And it's so long ago. It's 30-something years ago
right.
that I'm talking about right now.
Yeah.
But the essence of the whole mission for me was when we got that show, when Dave got that show, but I was there with him.
Yeah, sure.
Carson said there are 2 restrictions. You can't do Stump the Band, which was a segment they did where the musicians tried to guess a song.
Okay.
And you can't have an announcer come out and sit down with you. You shouldn't do an opening monologue, and you can't have your announcer come in and sit down with you and exchange anecdotes.
Oh, I see.
Those were the restrictions.
To Carson.
Right. That was what Carson demanded
I see.
as our restrictions. And I just
was
was laughing, going, well, that leaves the whole rest of everything.
Yeah, right.
So that was more or less what I felt my mission was. Because my training was art.
Yes, right.
What else is there?
Besides
in that world of everything, what else can we do? I used to read through the phone book in the days when we had a phone book. I can't only imagine how much broader my reach would have been if I had been going through
the internet.
But I actually sat and read the entire phone book in New York City. I started at A and I went to Z, and I looked for everything I thought was funny in the phone book, and I found lots of things I thought was funny in the phone book. I don't think they'd work as stand-up, but there, whole areas that I'd never seen on TV, that was a category for me.
Right.
Like I remember doing something on aluminum anodizing, just because I never saw anybody do any aluminum anodizing on TV. And I thought, well, okay, we'll do that. Every time I'd read an ad in the phone book that had made a claim, like
so
world's best coffee.
Like the yellow
the yellow pages is what I was reading.
I see.
The yellow pages. There were little drawings, and they'd have, they'd make a claim like world's best cheesecake, and then I'd go, well, let's see if it really is the world's best. I was challenging every insane thing I saw in the phone book, and then there would be a reason to go over to that place because we had a camera crew.
Right.
So that was a lot of content. That we did.
That's great.
It was a world of things like that. The whole city of New York was kind of fodder. It seemed
playground.
Like.
Yeah, you know what? I love that anecdote because I'm working on this new book, and it's actually business lessons from the masters of comedy. So you are a master of comedy.
I am a mistress.
A mistress, fair enough. And one of the things is how creative processes, on one hand, feel a little bit sort of magical. You have a different way of thinking about things and so on. But on the other hand, is that some of it's a bit of a grind. Right, as you were saying earlier, the obvious jokes you don't want to tell because everybody's telling those jokes.
Yeah, I'm always looking but not everybody feels that way. I mean, I know people who, when they see an obvious area, they immediately want to weigh in on it.
Uh-huh.
For me, it's like, well, this has been used up.
Yeah.
What else can I talk about?
Yeah, so you have to persist. You have to try harder to look beyond the obvious.
Yeah.
And
like when I used to
reading the entire yellow pages is an act of perseverance,
right?
In terms of pursuing.
I didn't do it all in one day. I was doing it day after day after day after day, though.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah, I always was looking for source material that nobody was using because you can't manufacture stuff out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. We were always going through gift catalogs, and we were going through newspapers from tiny towns, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
It would be so bottomless now. The internet
right.
with the internet.
Yeah. I mean, perhaps it's too much.
Also, the amount of direct feedback on the hate would be so enormous.
That's right.
Well, they couldn't find you that easily then,
Yes, you had maybe dealt with letters and so on.
Yeah, we were doing that. I mean, we started doing this thing, viewer mail.
Right. That's right.
That was because 60 Minutes had a segment called Viewer Mail, and it was always really important letters about atomic testing or something. And then I was reading, for a while I used to read our mail thinking, okay, this is a source of stuff. And it was so demoralizing to read the mail. It was so many crazy people or delusional people having a communication with the show, and they were in a mental hospital, I
see.
I stopped reading it after a while, and then we went off and tried another way to do the whole thing. I was thought it would initially, this would be funny, just find crackpots who have something crazy to say about the show. And that didn't turn out to be, didn't turn out to be a good way to go with it at all.
Yeah, I think this is the lament about Twitter. I mean, I'm still on it, but, I made the mistake of clicking on some link. What is his name? So Dennis Quaid, who's an old man now, just got engaged to a very young woman.
Yeah, I saw that.
And I never do this, and I realized why I never do it. I started reading through the comments.
Yeah. Oh, I've never read through comments either. I've never read one comment about anything about me.
And it was, I would say the ratio was probably like 10-1 negative vitriol, bad jokes to 1, which is congratulations, happy you found, love or whatever it is, kind of thing.
Whatever.
I mean, and that's a pretty mild thing. Obviously, that's just like a quirky Hollywood story. Obviously the world of politics and business and everything now, is there's just so much more of that kind of stuff that I could see. Yeah, there is this sort of thing like, you want feedback from your audience, the people who come to the studio because they're a fan. And then obviously you want to make sure the bits work for a broad audience, but you're never going to make it. We were talking about this before we fired up the podcast. Can never make everyone happy. Just by virtue of some people laughing, there's going to be some people who are not.
You can never, and you shouldn't even try, because as soon as you start trying to second guess what's going to make everybody happy, you're off your own game.
Yeah.
I mean, you really got to stay with what comedy is, such a personal viewpoint, in my opinion. It's so, for me, I've been doing it sort of automatically forever. When I finally figured out I was doing it automatically forever, I cast a net for jokes the minute I walk into any even deranged situation. I mean, I don't know about really terrifying danger. That might be different. But I do know that as soon as every time I've been hospitalized, I start looking for them.
For the opportunity. Yeah.
For joke.
Yeah,
for joke data.
Yeah.
It's just a reflex. And every time I've been to a funeral, I have a voice in my head that starts looking for joke data.
Sure, yeah. I think
actually all the funerals I've been to lately, I mean, the ones that come are friends of mine who were in comedy. They're all like one person after another. They're like a roast.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're unbelievably great.
Yeah, because I think like if you're a comedian, you want people roasting you. Probably.
Well, you like people getting up and doing unbelievably great material in your name. I mean, they've been really funny, the few that I can think of right now.
And I mean, I think I'm a fan of the old school Friars Club roast, not the new school Comedy Central roast. Like the Friars Club roasts work because they're roasts from the perspective of affection. You get roasted by your friends and peers. Versus Comedy Central, which is this free-for-all.
Those are harsh.
Which everybody's hating on everyone, and so they have the license to say these mean things.
And then you're sitting there, those people are sitting there pretending they think it's a riot to have somebody say something horrible about you.
Horrible, yeah.
Yeah, geez, I can't think of, that's great. I was hoping somebody would tell me I was fat.
Yeah, I think...
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not my particular form of comedy. So I want to ask you a couple of quick things before we wrap up. So we had an email exchange earlier, and I had asked you about Andy Kaufman.
Yeah.
And so, Andy, I think, for me personally, is such a fascinating comedic character. And he was a friend, acquaintance of yours.
Yeah, he was one of the first people I met when I moved to L.A., and I was drawn to him because he was so art school, in my opinion.
Seriously, yes.
He was almost a performance artist.
I agree, yeah. He wouldn't call himself a comic.
No, well, he was calling himself a song and dance man.
That's
He
right.
kept calling himself, but he had some kind of very maybe he was on the spectrum. We would say now he had some very odd personality formation where part of the time he'd be really happy to see you, and part of the time it had a look of preoccupation, like he'd never met you before.
I see. Yeah.
Which
and I mean, one of the things that he had done, would do these wrestling bits. Where he would say he was the world intergender wrestling champion.
Yeah, that was actually after I knew him. I guess I knew him as for years. I wasn't seeing him anymore after that, but but I used to hang out with him at the Improv some.
Yeah, and you wrestled with him once.
I didn't wrestle with him. It was really the beginning of his wrestling thing, I think. I mean, I don't think it was day one or anything. Obviously, he was interested in wrestlers, as was Letterman. You know, when we started that show, the initial guests that Letterman wanted to have on that show were somebody named Dick the Bruiser.
Okay.
He liked wrestling.
Huh.
I had no
reaction. Midwest.
Yeah, Midwest thing. I had no reaction to wrestling. I never watched a minute of it in my life. So
I did when I was a teenager a little bit. It's surprisingly compelling.
Yeah, if you find it to be so.
Yeah.
I always looked at it and went, I don't know, what else is on?
Of course, I get that. But it has, it sort of has the excitement of a lot of athletic endeavors, but it also has these sort of compelling good evil narratives, and so it has a sort of storytelling thing that a lot of sports don't have.
Unique. I mean, is it an American invention? Well, sumo wrestling, no. What am I saying?
Well, the Greeks wrestled, but professional wrestling, I'm sure, is an American. The fakeness
it's very
of it.
Cartoony.
Yes, I think I would be amazed if it was invented anywhere except the United States.
Yeah, I don't.
You just take wrestling, the athletic endeavor, and then you make it Hollywood.
Because what Andy was doing that I thought was really hilarious when I was involved with it, he was doing this talk show at midnight at the Improv.
Okay.
And he was calling me a writer, but I don't think I wrote him so much as a syllable. He was very self-propelled. He knew what he wanted. He would I could be there and go, yeah, wow, good. That's hilarious. But I mean, he didn't need any help. He was on his own planet and he knew what he wanted to do. But anyway, he had this idea for this show, and I was brand new to town, so it was a fun thing for me to hang around. I don't think I creatively contributed to it beyond my wrestling and I think I may have contributed the dialogue for me and the woman I wrestled.
Okay.
I'd possibly commit. I don't even remember what that dialogue was exactly, but it was this thing he was doing called late night snacks or something like that, or
Midnight Snacks?
Midnight Snacks, yeah. And his brilliant stroke to me, the thing that was the greatest was that he had the desk up about a foot higher than the guests.
Yeah, that's funny.
That was just completely funny to me.
Yeah.
And then he had me come on as a guest, and then he had this other woman whose name I've been trying to think of, and I can't. She was an actress. She was playing an anti-feminist and I was playing a feminist, and we argued about feminism briefly, and then Andy, sitting at that higher desk, said, well, there's only one way to solve this, and that would be to wrestle.
I see.
And then she and I wrestled briefly. I can't tell you even who won. I mean, I
would hope feminism would win. No,
wasn't about that. I think we actually did whatever we had never rehearsed it or anything. I think we scrambled for a couple of minutes. Me and this actress. I don't even remember who came out on top. I think maybe she won.
Okay.
And then whoever won, he went. Well, there you have it. That's there's the winner of the debate.
I have to imagine what in today's world, if Andy were around.
Oh, there's plenty of these guys now. There's a lot of these guys now. Have you ever seen Eric Andre?
Yes. I met him, yeah. Briefly, I think.
I haven't seen his show in a long time, but the few that I watched when it first came on really made me laugh. I thought they were hilarious. They were so deconstructed in a talk show in such a bizarre, dark way that I really, really thought they were funny. Just the fact that he came on, the first thing he does is destroy the set, and then he had a band that was just making noise.
I see.
I thought that was really funny.
Yeah, I guess you're right. There's a lot. Well,
obviously you didn't think it was funny, so it wasn't funny to you.
Well, yeah.
But it was funny to me and Eric Andre.
Clearly, yeah. So, well, I always ask this question last, and it sounds like you are someone who spends a lot of time creating.
Yeah, I do it just constantly. I'm not comfortable waking up in the morning and not having a project. Mm-hmm. So like when this massive amount of drawings ended, I'm still in the process with them. The art director's got them now, and he's going to send a bunch of them back to me to fix. I'm waiting on that.
Okay.
But when that's done is going to leave a giant maw, a chasm around me, and I'm going to have to
figure out something
else. You know, it was really weird. One time it happened when I can't remember what it was, but I mean, one of my solutions was when I started resuming stand-up comedy in the late 80s. It was because I was finished with something and I thought I really need to be out in the world more. I need to meet more people. I need to go more places. I need to be more connected. And so my solution to that was get in a car all by myself, drive into town, get on a stage all by myself, say a few things, get off, get back in the car, go home all by myself. That was my engagement with the world. But it is, in fact, engaging. You know, sure, of course, obviously it's terrifying, but it's a really peculiar solution to group engagement.
Yes. I mean, I'm happy to hear you be so clear about what compels you in your
nothing
life.
If not overly analytical. Andy, my husband, calls it my lawyer brain. I can't help. It's how I write humor too. I can't help but analyze everything. Mm-hmm. I analyze and analyze. I see things almost like a schemata. Sometimes I see stuff in front of me like it's like a blueprint, you know, and you're supposed to dissect it.
Like the Matrix.
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
I'm just super analytical and I can't not be. And then whenever I see no logic in that Matrix, to me that's a joke.
Yeah, I see.
That's instantly a joke.
I see.
I like I like things that don't operate on logic.
Yeah.
Too much logic is funny too.
Yeah, I see what you mean. That's really cool. So, but when you're not creating and you're consuming, whether it be something you're reading or watching or listening to.
Yeah, I take in a lot.
Is there something that really stands out to you that you just think is great?
Lots and lots of things anymore.
So
give me a
couple examples of what you like, something you're reading, watching, or listening to that you think is just excellent.
Well, I'm enjoying Ronan Farrow's new book about Harvey Weinstein.
Okay.
I just watched some movie called Laundromat that Steven Soderbergh and Jake Bernstein did that I thought was incredibly good.
Okay.
I watched I do a lot of that. I'm always looking for a show like everybody does anymore, you know, and I love the binge watching when you find
something that works for you.
The most amazing one to me in recent years was Breaking Bad. I was blown away by how great that was.
Yeah.
But I just enjoyed some really peculiar show called Lodge 49 that was I was arguing with it in my head for about the first 5 episodes, and then I gave in and enjoyed it.
Okay.
And for a while I was, no, it's over the top. Oh, no, they blew it there. That's not funny. And then I gave in. I realized they won me over, and I shut up and just enjoyed the rest of it.
Is that right? So you gave it, look, the fact that you...
I'm so critical. But that's sort of how I learned to do anything, is I learned how to diss what I don't like so that I try not to replicate what I don't like.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, Merrill, I think that you can afford to be a critical consumer of comedy, especially.
I can't help it, actually.
Well, no, but I mean, also the other, look, here's the thing is that, I have this saying.
And when people are good, I'm just blown away by how great. You know?
Well, I have this saying, which is, so easy to criticize, so difficult to create. And so I think that when
unless that's all you know how to do is just create, and then it's not difficult. It's sort of the only thing you know how to do.
Yeah, no. But my point is that when
I do know how to feed wild animals now.
Yes, you're doing that weekly. You said, right?
I went and cleaned squirrel cages for 4 hours yesterday.
All right.
So I know how to do that too.
Well, Merrill, as you know, I've been emailing you back and forth for a long time now, and I appreciate you opening up your home and having me come and get a chance to get a little glimpse into your world. It's a fascinating one.
Oh, well, I'm glad you find it fascinating.
Yeah, it's great fun. So really appreciate your time.
Oh, well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to visit petermcgraw.org for more information about our guest, show notes, and social media links. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share with others. Join Dr. Peter McGraw next week for another fun, fascinating conversation on I'm Not Joking.
Yo.